First advice is that it is a Category 4. It is close to Willis Island. In fact, past Willis Island on its way towards the coast, and it is still tracking to near Cairns.
Please take this warning seriously. This is a very significant and serious and potentially life-threatening cyclone.
Next morning I woke up to a very different landscape, I can tell you. Yeah.
I suppose for all of us, probably the largest event of our lives. It's just 5 hours of terror.
In the last 5 years, there have been 2 severe cyclones in far north Queensland. The last one, Cyclone Yasi, was the most powerful in living memory to cross the Queensland coast. The concern is that these 2 superstorms signal a new era of severe weather events. What can we learn from these 2 cyclones and those who experience them that might help us prepare for future major weather events? Some communities realised they weren't prepared at all for the possible consequences of a disaster of this scale.
It became really frightening when we were able to see this monster bearing down on us, you know. So with the sea surge, a possible sea surge, we could be in real strife here at Gilligan. End up being about 40 Aboriginal people here, from as young as 2 months old to elderly people, housed here through the cyclone. There was no formal evacuation centre. It was like something out of a movie. Police cars going up and down the main street saying, evacuate, imminent danger, leave Cardwell now. And we're standing on the footpath, yeah, well that's good, but where are we going to go? You know, and then the other problem was once you leave the area, you could be cut off from here for weeks after, you know.
The cyclone was a bit over 3 weeks ago, 3.5 weeks. Tropical Cyclone Yasi. Category 5, the worst one recorded in Australia, and the wind was up around the 300 kilometre an hour mark, so it was pretty fearsome. Yeah, well, this is part of our rambutan block. Good cropping trees, and it came basically from the southeast first for about 2 or 3 hours. All of a sudden it stopped as the eye passed over, and we were in the eye for about 40 to 45 minutes, and it was quite surreal. It's nearly worth going through a cyclone just to experience the eye, because we got out, it was deathly still, just the frogs croaking like crazy. Absolute clear skies and total star cover. And then when it turned and we got the other side, that's when the real damage happened. It was just, we thought it'd never end. And I suppose it points to the state that you just can't have big trees and you've got to keep everything low and short in cyclone zones.
After the 2006 cyclone, Peter began searching for new ways of growing fruit, installing trellises to support some of the trees to provide better chance of surviving disasters.
Whether it's climate change or global warming or whatever, I think we have to throw the rule book out and not rest on our laurels thinking we'll get a time span. We have to be prepared for just about anything weather-wise. It's all part of the scheme of growing fruit in the Australian tropics.
The cyclone paths of Larry in 2006 and Yasi in 2011 were remarkably similar. Having been through 2 devastating cyclones in such a short time, farmers have been able to put into action the lessons they learnt.
Our company name is 3C Farms. Citrus, cane and cattle. So we do limes, pomelos, cane and a little bit of cattle. We were just on the southern edge of the eye. We prune our trees every year, and that's a management strategy that we do just to get new growth in the trees anyway. When Cyclone Larry hit, we actually finished pruning the trees just before that one, and the trees survived quite well. Obviously we didn't know that Yasi was coming. But our strategy has been by, February we try to have all the trees well and truly pruned by then. Well, the pruning takes off all your huge leaf load, leaves your big strong trunks. So you've got less to move around in the wind and uproot your trees basically. It took them a long time to recover. So we didn't have commercial fruit available until about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And since then it's just been flat out. We noticed the same thing after Larry. Our trees just fruited twice as much as what they normally would. So I guess it's a positive at the end of it, yeah. This is the environment we live in, so I guess it's just something we've got to accept.
While further north in Mirrawinny, a relatively new grower is working to protect her crop from damage.
We were in the red zone of the cyclone, but we didn't get the eye this time. Larry, the eye passed right over us, but with Yasi it just dipped south, so we missed the eye. We grow vanilla and we process it into gourmet niche products. We moved to the area about 7 years ago, so we weren't very far along when Cyclone Larry came, which was really quite good for us because we could really have a bit of a reality check and think, okay, well, this is probably going to happen again. So we had a look around at what had happened to the bananas and sheds and various structures, and we noticed that a lot of things below about 1 metre stayed either unmoved from the ground or intact. So we thought that if we were able to drop the vines down below 1 metre, we might be able to save the crop or at least mitigate some of the effects of the cyclone. We just took big snips and just cut it, and the whole lot just went thump on the ground. Our structures are very simple and we were able to get them back up one each day, but getting the vines back up took a lot longer because they're so heavy and we didn't realise how heavy they are. The plants that are suffering now most were the ones that sat on the ground the longest, and they've probably got soil fungus into the plant. I think the biggest thing is that we can grow crops here even with cyclones. I think that in some ways the people who've lived here all their lives, they haven't actually experienced cyclones so close together as Larry and Yasi, whereas now for us that's normal. We're just looking at constantly adapting what was a new venture anyway.
Queensland's sugar industry faced a loss of more than $500 million from the destructive path of Cyclone Yasi.
After events like this, it takes a number of years to bring your farm back to the productivity that you had it. I'll just give an example. Cyclone Larry took me 4 years before I went round all my blocks. Every block had been replaced since that cyclone. So it took me 4 years, and it'll take me probably the same again. So it's not a thing that happens on that year and then you fix it all up at the end of that year and you're sweet for the next year. It takes 3 to 4 and even sometimes 5 years, depending on the size of the grower. And there's a way of probably, keeping your business strong by putting money away when you have good years, hopefully, and then you'll be able to, ride out those really bad years. But if it was to be the norm, I think it would probably put a lot of us out of business.
As with Cyclone Larry, Cyclone Yasi devastated about 85% of the banana industry. Many farmers lost entire crops, but this time some trialled de-leafing and other measures to help protect their livelihood.
We grow bananas on the Russell River, 100 hectare farm. We're getting sick of these cyclones, but that's part of North Queensland, I think. A banana tree makes, I think it's about 27 or 28 leaves, I'm not sure. When it finishes making all its leaves, it throws the bunch, and the tree needs 8 to 10 green leaves to grow the bunch. So if you go and cut a tree that's fully grown, cut all the leaves off, it won't be successful in carrying a bunch. We decided we were going to get hit, so we had a block we thought still had 8 or 10 leaves to make, so we went through and cut all those leaves off and just left the stem there and I think we got through about 45 acres in the day, and that night the cyclone came. They survived quite well, those trees.
Some of the bunches are a bit small, which is a bit disappointing, but in the end, to have some production when no one else had any, helped a lot of growers with the cash flow, and many of them have come back and they've recouped all their money before this glut. The intention is to do research this year on the deleafing aspect and to see how far we can push it and fine tune it a bit.
It's hard to make the decision to go and do it because you might do it and the cyclone doesn't hit you.
When Cyclone Yasi was heading towards Cairns, we got pretty worried because we remembered what Larry did to us. We then went out and cut the tops, took our orchard hedges through some, just took the top part of the leaves off, lent bunches over on 120 acres, and the cyclone bypassed us. So yeah, we effectively lost 120 acres of production during this, Yeah, I don't think there's any right answer. It comes down to statistics and percentages. If you're on the coast, you probably wouldn't hesitate to do something. Up here, I don't know what the correct answer would be. If you miss a cyclone, you're effectively a bit like winning the lottery.
Industries further inland were not spared Yasi's destructive forces. On cattle stations, fallen trees damaged hundreds of kilometres of fence lines.
It's not a simple matter of just weaving your way through the standing timber anymore. It's just trees down everywhere. There's areas where I would suggest upwards of 60 or 70% of the trees in a given area are on the ground. Well, the eye of the cyclone passed over the top of us here I think it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I've never experienced wind like it before, so pretty severe. Every fence on the place was trashed. Yeah, pretty much your fence gets knocked over, you don't have any control over your cattle anymore. I think I worked out there's close to 140 kilometres of fencing, boundary fence and internal fencing, and probably on average there was a tree across the fence every 40 yards. I started the day after the cyclone and I think probably finished, I think it was about early May, I think, so close to 3 months. We're restricted as to how wide we can clear a fence line under the Vegetation Management Act, and we can clear 5 metres either side. It is something that I think we're fairly hopeful might be revisited at some stage.
Innisfail has more experience of damaging cyclones than any other coastal town.
This is the third direct hit of a cyclone that we've had here in Innisfail in the 30 plus years that I've been here, and each one of those cyclones has taught me different things. The biggest change I see is always to the physical environment, to the biotic environment, the trees. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that it keeps on changing. You learn to appreciate the processes that you see, the regeneration of the forest naturally, and the amazing capability of many species to survive under really quite, well, for us humans, pretty horrific conditions. You see after a cyclone, people who haven't experienced it before, they come out, they look around, they're devastated by the change, and they're trying as hard as they can to somehow put it back to how it was before the cyclone. All that extra clearing, when they're going in, picking up debris, taking it away, there are a lot of little seedlings and things which are growing, and this is their chance. You're actually setting the forest back. Last time after Larry, they got in and they cleared 10 metres either side of each road, any tree which might possibly fall on a road, it was gone. People did excessive clearing. This time, far better, sat back and said, well, what do we need to do now?
I looked beyond my property boundary of what I could see very clearly now because there was no more vegetation around. I could see the hills and mountains and realised this impact was significant. significant enough that Terrain would have to play a pretty important role in what was to come. People mostly wonder who Terrain Natural Resource Management is. We are a not-for-profit community-based organisation. Our responsibilities are to ensure that natural resource management in the wet tropics area is undertaken in the best possible way. Part of Terrain's strength is that it works very closely with a whole range of groups like land care, catchment management groups, industry groups, because they're all the people that are on the ground wondering about what to do.
After the first major cyclone, Terrain had gathered together various groups from the community to find out what they felt about what had happened after the disaster and what could be done better.
One of the critical things that came out of the lessons from Larry is that the community said, we don't want to be just an afterthought, we want very much to be part of the decision-making process. After Cyclone Yasi, grabbed the document, sat down and said, okay, what do we do from here? In the disaster cleanup process, we were really clear that we had to be primarily involved with facilitation, making sure that our community groups and the people that we knew were impacted had a voice.
One of the things that we learned is that people just really didn't know how to get started. It's very overwhelming straight after a cyclone. So with our technical expertise and with our trained work crews, Terrain was able to give people some getting started advice really, how to go about what you should be doing with your cleanup, minimising the environmental harm and getting the best outcome.
We are still learning as we go. Every cyclone will be different, and every cyclone will reveal new environmental issues.
Before Yasi clobbered us, we were aware of the fact that the mahogany gliders were here. We lost approximately 1,000 trees on the course. Now that was a significant blow to the habitat of the glider, obviously. I mean, their gliding distance is a maximum of approximately 30 metres, I believe. There are areas now where they don't have that distance. Yeah, when one of the trees was taken down and a mahogany glider was discovered in the hollows within the tree, it certainly reinvigorated interest in it again, with National Parks and Wildlife and Terrain becoming involved. And it also became of particular interest to the golf club that we could maintain some sort of protection for them.
Prior to the cyclone, the estimates were between 1,500 to 2,000 animals remained in the wild. And I guess we really don't know what's happened to the population. They've got a very limited range, the smallest range of any mammal in Australia.
And the habitat of this endangered species, that was already fragmented and vulnerable, was right in the path of the eye of the cyclone.
We want to make their habitat as natural as possible. There's been a revegetation process occurring on the course. With Terrain coming in and very thankfully providing hundreds of trees, they will be of some significance for the gliders in years to come. It'll just ensure that we can keep them here on the course.
It's reaffirmed the biggest issues we've got, and that's connectivity and this fragmentation of habitat. I think we need to start talking about individual trees making a difference, because I think that's probably easier for some people to understand too, that sometimes it's a single tree that can make the difference between where the gliders can get from one place to another. In a way, the positive that comes out of this glider losing his home, it's the first place really in Cardwell where we've had the opportunity to look at using this as something really special for the community. So the signage going in that will be educational, and for visitors it adds another dimension to their understanding of how special the wet tropics are, and especially these coastal forests, because we hear so much about rainforest and how special the rainforest is, and quite often these lowland coastal woodlands and all of the species that rely totally on them that can't live in rainforest are overlooked.
In the Mission Beach area, the region's most famous inhabitants, the endangered southern cassowaries, were badly affected by the cyclones.
They already face a pretty hard battle, and obviously with their main resource being impacted as much as it is, we need to give them a helping hand as much as we can.
As a result of lessons from Larry, the Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service was better equipped and ready to roll out the cassowary supplementary feeding program.
Today we're going to head in, we're at East Innisfail. We're on a little patch of scrub behind some houses. We'll be heading in through here. We've got a feed station in there because we had some birds reported going into people's backyards following the cyclone. So we set up a feed station to try and draw them back into the forest and away from the houses. When they do move through urban areas, that can increase the risk of being attacked by dogs or vehicle strike, and also people would be possibly more inclined to feed them, and this can create some pretty bad behaviours and they may become aggressive. The cassowary's primary food resource is the forest fruits. Basically, the trees were stripped bare of leaves and fruit and limbs, and the ones that weren't wiped out during Larry, a lot of them fell during Cyclone Yasi, so huge impact to their resource in such quick succession. After Cyclone Larry, it certainly gave us a good pre-run of what to do with Cyclone Yasi. We have a huge demand in terms of fruit. We've delivered over 122,000 kilograms of fruit to feed stations. So while we've got a team of 10 rangers, there's close to 100 hours of fruit cutting a week. So without our volunteers, it would basically compromise the running of the program and we'd really struggle.
It became apparent that involvement by the community in projects such as this were highly successful, both for the volunteers' well-being and the sense of recovery in the community. Preservation and recovery of the natural environment is also very important for the tourism industry, as it provides many jobs in the region.
Yeah, a lot of people see it as a big asset, particularly people who provide accommodation for tourists come and stay here because you're more likely to see cassowaries and other special rainforest fauna because we're part of this big habitat system. There's all this protected area like the national park up on the hills behind Mission Beach that goes all the way, continuous rainforest, up to the southern Atherton tablelands. And then when it gets to the coast here, it's a very contested landscape. We've just got some real narrow little fragments that then open up onto big coastal habitat that's really important for cassowaries at different times of year.
But after the impacts of 2 cyclones, these narrow corridors, which are already highly fragmented, are now becoming even more vulnerable. One of the problems Terrain's workers have identified is that restoration work needs to happen over many years, but much of the disaster recovery funding is short-term.
You can't go around in a short-term program and in a short-term recovery response planting huge numbers of trees in the ground that really are going to need 2 to 3 years to be looking after them. So what we've done is try to be very strategic about where we've placed our revegetation efforts and concentrated rather on managing the weeds that we know really respond profusely after cyclone and disturbance events, and really trying to just harness the natural recovery ability of the vegetation there.
Well, after the impact of Yasi and the devastation it left, it also created some opportunities. We're fortunate enough to broker 2 contracts from the state government through the Department of Education, Employment, Development and Innovation. One was through the Operation Cleanup, and another project was through the Jobs Skills Package. Gilligan's aim was to use the project as a community building tool, and we recruited 60 plus people over a 6-month period, which injected money into our community, so the flow on to local businesses, our local supermarkets, butchers. It was a great boost to the northern economy.
All the families coming in each week and buying plenty of meat, which has just been unreal for us.
A lot of them never had work before. The project started and now they've all got work, which puts more money back into the community, and they do come to the store and spend their money in the store, and I'm sure they spend it in other shops in Cardwell.
Gilligan is a self-made organisation made by the traditional owners themselves for ourselves. And for a long time the board has wanted to see the development of a ranger program, and as it turned out the political stars all lined up, I suppose, and we were able to seek and acquire funding from both the state and the federal government to develop our own Indigenous Ranger program. The Rangers, they really came to the fore after the event. They were able to get out there with the chainsaws and vehicles and that, and just assist the border community in cleaning up after the cyclone. But I've got to mention here that we had 3 other Indigenous Ranger programs that came and helped us as well, from the Gulf, and guys from Ewing and rangers from around Mariba, Burketown, that area, from Archer Point. And we're here for the long haul, and you know, we're just so grateful to those guys to come and help us at that time of need, you know. In the time of a disaster like Cyclone Yasi, the cyclone don't discriminate. They don't just damage black people, they damage everybody, you know. From a public image perspective, our guys are out there helping no matter who they are, black, white or brindle. And in the hour of need, they were there in force, helping the broader community recover. And a lot of real positive feedback from the broader community.
Like since Yasi, they have done a lot of work for the community. And I just think it's marvellous what they do.
Out of this whole disaster, we're looking at developing an Indigenous Rangers disaster and contingency plan for any future disasters. You know? And under this plan, we'll be able to unify all those Indigenous Ranger programs throughout North Queensland, here in the Gulf and the Torres Straits, to be able to assist with a moment's notice to any disaster anywhere in the state. You know? If we're able to do some sort of a social analysis of the whole thing, I think we'd be very surprised if we could put it to some sort of dollar figure. It'd be the contribution would be enormous, you know.
But people all use that word resilience, and it's a great word to use. I'm not sure that everybody understands it, and also becomes a bit of a buzzword that, yeah, everybody's saying it. But that idea of you do bounce back, you can bounce back. I mean, you take on board what's happened and you come back better.
And we're working positively towards making ourselves cyclone proof, because we don't get we don't get hail, we don't get frost, we don't get bushfires, we don't get flood, we don't get drought. We just get a puff of wind once in a while.
We have some really good knowledge behind us on what to look for, where to go as well, how to place the feed stations. All of this information is really good, not just for management of cassowaries following a cyclone, but it will also help managing cassowaries outside cyclone affected times.
We rely very heavily on our relationships and the partnerships we have, and that if you don't have those and you don't maintain those, then when it comes to times of disaster or crisis, then it's very difficult to achieve anything on your own.
I think too that we're all learning social resilience and how we support each other. I think there's a lot more attention to mental health issues this time, and we can all just keep learning. So I guess the good side is if we do have another cyclone this year, we all know exactly what to do, and we'll all be in there and accessing all the great facilities that are available.
But I think it makes me very aware of just how lucky we are to live in a place like this. It's seriously special.